I've been waiting for an inexpensive but decent HDMI 2.1 switch ever since I bought my LG OLED. Some people pair an expensive TV with an AV receiver, which gives you the ability to set up surround sound speakers. Modern receivers also have built-in HDMI switches, so you only have to have a single HDMI cable running from the receiver to the back of the TV. That would be ideal in my case because I have this little cable tunnel that hides the cables between the TV and my TV stand. Now, I don't really need an AV receiver since I just use stereo speakers powered by this little fuzzy audio amp. Not to mention that HDMI 2.1 capable AV receivers start at least $400. But I still want to connect all of my retro and modern game consoles to my TV with full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth. Recently, I found this relatively inexpensive UGREEN HDMI 2.1 switch. I've been testing it for the last few days, and I think it's a solid solution. But like with anything inexpensive, there are a few downsides. I want to take you through my use cases and give you my honest opinion about whether or not you should buy this HDMI 2.1 switch for your retro and modern gaming setup. This video is sponsored by PCBWay, but more on them later. I didn't really feel like waiting, and I already took the UGREEN switch out of the box, but I figured I would show you what the box looks like as well as what was inside of it. So it says it supports HDR, 240 Hertz, it has some built-in shielding, and on the back there's some specifications. It has 5 HDMI inputs, 1 HDMI output, resolution up to 8K 60 Hz. It supports HDCP 2.3 and it's backward compatible with older versions. It supports RGB, YCbCr 444 and some of the other formats. And it supports some audio formats up to 7.1 channels. Here's some information about the power supply. It's 5 volts at 2 amps. In the box was the switch itself. There's the button to switch the inputs, but there's also remote control. There's an IR sensor for the remote control. There's these 5 LEDs in the front to indicate which input is selected. On the back is the DC barrel jack, the HDMI out port, and the 5 HDMI in ports. There's also the AC adapter. Like I said, it says 5 volts at 2 amps. Also in the box is this remote, which allows you to quickly change to any one of the inputs, as well as cycle to the next input. And it's powered by 2 AAA batteries. And it also includes this little manual, basically tells you all the same information that was on the box. There is this page about recommended cable lengths because as you get to the higher resolutions and frequencies, you should basically use a shorter cable to ensure a stable connection. I'm probably gonna stay around the 4K 120 Hertz, so it says less than 9.8 feet for both the input and output cables. Speaking of cables, I think it's pretty important to have high quality cables for a setup like this in the higher resolution and FPS range. I really like this PowerBear brand from Amazon. They make 4K cables, and this darker cable is actually an 8K cable. So in my setup, I pretty much only use these PowerBear cables, especially the 8K cable going to the TV. Before we even get to my testing, I wanted to mention that this UGREEN HDMI switch doesn't support auto switching. That means that you have to manually select the correct port to the device that you want to use. If you power on a console that is not on the currently selected port, the switch will not automatically switch to that port. This might be a non-starter for some people, but for the price, and as long as it works for all of my use cases, that's a feature that I can live without. The first console that I tested was my PS5. I wanted to know if the UGREEN switch worked with HDMI CEC, LG calls this feature Simple Link, to wake the TV when the PS5 is turned on. I made sure to set the switch to the right input for the PS5, and then I turned on the PS5 by holding down the PlayStation button on the controller. The TV turned on and I was greeted with the PlayStation 5 login screen, which is a good sign. When I put the PS5 to sleep, however, the TV didn't turn itself off. This is probably a bug with the PS5 because when I tried the same test using my MacBook Pro, putting the Mac to sleep did actually turn the TV off. The PS5 shows the current video output as 4K with variable refresh rate enabled up to 120 Hz, which is the full bandwidth that my base PS5 supports, and HDR is enabled. For a demo game, I tested Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, which has a 120 Hz VRR mode if you select the performance mode in settings. Since my LG TV is set to game mode, if you press the settings button on the LG remote, you get a nifty readout of the current FPS, as well as whether or not variable refresh rate is turned on. My next test is with my Nintendo Switch 2. Again, I checked if waking the Switch 2 would turn the TV on, which it does. However, sleeping the Switch 2 again doesn't turn the TV off. I did a quick undocking and docking test, and it seems to pick up the signal after docking within a reasonable time. With the TV resolution set to automatic, the dock output information detects the resolution as 4K 60, and HDR is turned on. Unfortunately, the Switch 2 doesn't support 120 FPS mode at all, but playing Mario Kart World in 60 FPS on an OLED is a pretty awesome experience. Next up are my two 4K upscalers, the PixelFX Morph and the RetroTink 4K. I'm not a fan of the included PixelFX Morph remote, but one of the nice features of the Morph is that it supports using the TV's remote to navigate the OSD using HDMI CEC. This feature is supported through the UGREEN switch. I'm not much of a scanline and CRT mask person, but I figured I would test if HDR would be detected with both upscalers, and just quickly look at some of the CRT masks through HDR. The Morph supports HDR10 as well as HLG, and both of these modes were detected by the LG OLED. I don't know too much about what's actually happening in these modes. They're probably using some kind of a lookup table that expands SDR colors to HDR, but the real advantage of HDR mode is improved brightness. Some TVs can only achieve their maximum brightness in HDR mode, which comes in handy when using CRT masks that typically cause a loss of brightness. Here you can see me applying a GameCube profile and then messing around with the different CRT filters. Again, I'm not much of a scanline person, but everything seems to be working well enough that I could explore these settings more in the future. The RetroTink 4K doesn't support using the TV's remote to navigate its OSD like the Morph can. While I was testing the RetroTink 4K, I kept getting random audio dropouts while I was testing my GameCube using the B HDMI adapter. Apparently, there is a known issue with certain HDMI switches, and according to Reddit, the suggested fix is to either try a different HDMI switch or plug the RetroTink 4K directly into the TV. The RetroTink 4K also supports HDR10 and HLG like the Morph, and it even supports other interesting HDMI features like variable refresh rate, both FreeSync and VESA. I'm not really sure what VRR is actually used for, but both modes are detected by my LG TV. Next up is the Mister. The standard output for the Mister is 1080p, but I wanted to see if 1920 by 1440p worked. That is the 4:3 version of 1440p, and it's the highest resolution that the Mister supports. It worked without any problems, and with the TV in auto aspect ratio mode, it correctly displayed that it should be displayed as 4:3 and not stretched to 16:9. I wanted to test if the UGREEN switch was compatible with Mister Direct Video. This would only be useful if we wanted to use this switch as an input for either the Morph or the RetroTink 4K. First, I switched the direct video setting to 1 in the INI settings script. Then I loaded the SNES core. My LG TV doesn't know what to do with that direct video input, so it displayed an invalid format message. Next, I connected the output from the HDMI switch to the input on the Morph, and the output of the Morph to the HDMI cable going to the TV. The Morph had no problem with the direct video passing through the switch. I quickly tested some other random HDMI modded retro consoles, like a PS2 with a PixelFX Retro Gem, my original GBA consoleizer, and a GameCube with a B HDMI adapter. Last but not least, I wanted to do a latency test with my Mr. Laggy latency tester to see if the HDMI switch adds any latency to the video chain. For this first test, the Mister is connected directly to my LG TV. I'm getting about 3 milliseconds of delay from when the Mister outputs the frame to when it's displayed on the TV. So that's not bad at all. And now the Mister is connected through the HDMI switch, and I am seeing no difference whatsoever. So it's safe to say that this switch does not impact the latency, at least not at 1080p. Are you an electronics hobbyist or creator looking to take your projects to the next level? PCBWay has you covered. Whether it's custom PCBs, 3D printing, CNC machining, or even injection molding, PCBWay offers everything you need to make your projects come to life. With their PCB assembly service, they'll not only manufacture your custom PCBs, but also source and solder all of the components for you. Whether you're building your own project or an open source project, PCBWay makes it easy to create professional quality PCBs without breaking a sweat. Learn more by visiting the link in the video description. Here are my final thoughts. I think this is a really good option for anyone looking for a low-cost, high-performance HDMI 2.1 switch. It works well for all of my use cases, except for that weird RetroTink 4K audio issue. I'm curious if that's a widespread issue or if it's just an issue with this specific switch. Direct video pass-through is a nice bonus if you're looking for a reliable input switch for either the Morph or the RetroTink 4K. It's unfortunate that it doesn't support auto-switching, but it has a nice remote that you can easily change the inputs with. I just wish that the LED indicators were a little brighter. I'll leave an affiliate link for this UGREEN HDMI switch and the PowerBear HDMI cables that I recommend in the video description. I'm trying to get to 10,000 subscribers, so get subscribed and leave a comment if you think this switch will be useful in your setup. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.